My project begins with the recognition that what we eat is never neutral. Food sustains, but it also speaks. It carries memory, inequity, power. It embodies histories of trade and empire, of abundance and erasure, of survival and collapse. It is bound up in politics, culture, and ecological systems. I turn to still life because of its weight of history. In the Golden Age, the table was a stage of abundance and trade, a theatre of power where silver gleamed and lavish foods overflowed. I return to the genre not to revive its splendour, but to recast it as a site of testimony. The table becomes less a banquet than an archive, less display than disclosure, less spectacle than witness. My inquiry uses staple foods to explore the inherent risk in our drive for cheap food, a risk embodied by the vulnerability of monocultures. A single crop, blighted, becomes a lens for examining colonial history, present-day inequity, and planetary futures. Monoculture is more than an agricultural method. It is a system of abundance that conceals fragility. It transforms the promise of plenty into a paradox. Abundance in the short term, masking systematic vulnerability in the long term. This project uses photography to interrogate that paradox, making visible the fragility embedded within this abundance and turning staple foods into witnesses of both survival and systemic collapse. I approach food as entanglement, a knot of histories and futures, intimacy and empire, sustenance and inequity. Each item on the table binds the personal to the systemic, making visible how the act of eating is never innocent. This entanglement includes me, my own daily habits, my morning coffee, blueberries in my breakfast year round, reminding me that I am part of the very systems I examine. The work acknowledges this complicity, not to absolve it, but to recognise that none of us stand outside these histories of trade, power, and extraction. Photography is uniquely suited to this task. It fixes what is fleeting, creating an archive of change. At the same time, still life photography carries its own historical weight. It is long tied to power and trade. By reworking the genre, I use photography not simply as depiction, but as excavation, making visible what food conceals. The paradox of plenty draws on practitioners such as Olivier Richon, Keith Arnott, and Laura Litinsky, amongst others, whose work turns the everyday into. They inspire my reimagining of still life as an inquiry into fragility, inequity, and the hidden layers beneath the surface veneer. This approach grows out of earlier projects in which I sought to reveal the power embedded in seemingly neutral materials. In enduring imprints from the colonial gaze, I examined how botanical classification served imperial control. In Sugar-Coated Lies, I employed refined sugar as a central metaphor to interrogate whiteness as an artificial social construct. Both works taught me that seemingly mundane materials can, when examined through the appropriate prism of inquiry, reveal fascinating and complex stories. Golden Age still life was born out of colonial trade and exploitation. It once celebrated capitalism's ascent. I repurpose it, at its potential dusk, a moment Moore and Patel diagnose as the exhaustion of cheap food. The table that once displayed wealth becomes a site of decay, mapping not only the beginning of extraction, but its potential unravelling. Underlying this work is a dual position. As an Irish artist, famine memory shapes how I see a potato as a site of survival and erasure. As a scientist focused on sustainability, I attend to how consumption connects to our planetary future. This tension is central. The work critiques the very systems I cannot escape. The indelible trace of our consumption, the gaseous methane plumes from landfill, a stain that lasts. It is the metabolic endpoint of the system that brings us both cheap food and constant convenience. It makes tangible the abstract cost of our waste, drawing a direct line from our local choices to a planetary consequence.